Okay, everyone, we're a little more than a minute after the hour. I think it's time for us to go ahead and get started. Welcome. We are so glad you're here. A few bits of housekeeping before we actually get started. First of all, this session will be recorded, so you can log back in. You can listen to it later. If you've got colleagues that you think would enjoy this session, they can register and access this webinar on demand once it's completed. All of our attendees are on mute, but that does not mean we don't want your questions. Please feel free to drop questions into the Q&A. We'll answer as many of them as we can. We're eager to be in conversation with you. All right, well, with that, hello, my name is Casey Foster. I'm joined by my fabulous co-host. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Katie Jensen Ord from Arizona State University.
Awesome, great. Well, we will be deep in discussion with Katie in just a minute, but first I want to start off by sharing just a little bit about Kuali, the company, so that you're familiar with who we are. Many of you likely know us well already, but for those of you who don't, I'm going to give you just a little bit of an overview so you know who we are and what our point of view is about software development. First of all, Kuali exists to create amazing software for higher education. And the way we do that is rooted in our history of community and partnership. Those are things we care a lot about. You might know that the Kuali project began in 2004 when a small group of colleges and universities came together. They pooled their resources to build administrative software to solve two problems that they were facing acutely. The first one was poorly designed administrative software that just didn't meet their needs well. The second was relationships with vendors that didn't feel like partnerships. So with the goal of solving those two problems, they pooled resources, began to build administrative software with the mentality of buy higher ed for higher ed. A number of schools were attracted to that project, but as the decade moved forward, the industry was changing and schools were interested in procuring software as a service, SaaS software, and the foundation wasn't well equipped to actually offer software as a service to its member institutions. So they decided to invest in and create a company, Kuali, and that's the company that my colleagues and I work for today. Today, Kuali is fully responsible for the design, development, and delivery of Kuali software. But we've carried with us that spirit of community and partnership that was so key to the founding of the Kuali project in the first place. Well, the company has grown considerably since 2014. This is just a small sampling of the more than 230 colleges and universities that use Kuali software. 2024 is a very exciting time at Kuali because across many of our product families, we are redesigning them to take advantage of our new innovative Kuali platform that we're very excited about. We're here today to talk about Kuali curriculum management. We do have some other products that are targeted for the provost and registrar, academic catalog, syllabus management, and as you might have noticed on the slide before this, we have a number of other product families as well. But again, today we are focused on curriculum management, and we'll talk a little bit about Build, to our no-code forms and workflow automation software. There are a few things that we're very excited about with our new redesigned software. The first is that it's mobile first. We know how important that is, so our software is very easy to access and use on mobile devices. The second is that it's super easy to use, kind of a new level of ease of use that we think really benefits our end users. It's accessible so that everyone is able to take advantage of our software and use it across campus. We also practice continuous delivery, which means that we ship new features when they're tested and ready. We don't save them up for a big annual or semi-annual upgrade. So you are never in a position of having to manage kind of a big annual or semi-annual expensive upgrade. You're just always in the latest version of our software. And finally, we're super proud of our zero bug policy. That doesn't mean that we never have a bug. All software occasionally has a bug. What it does mean is that when we discover a bug, we stop what we're doing, we fix it right away before we move on to building new features or doing other things. All right, that was a lot of information and a high-level overview about Kuali, the company. But I want to turn the focus of our conversation to Arizona State University. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Katie, I know you did a brief introduction before, but would you like to tell us a little bit about your role at ASU?
Sure. So I'm the director of curriculum development here in the provost office, and at ASU, the curriculum process for approval and review go through the provost office. So we're kind of the keepers of the curriculum to whatever extent. I know at some institutions, that's the registrar's office. In our institution, it's the provost office. And so my role is just to help facilitate the review and approval of curriculum programs specifically. There are so many people involved in our curriculum process at the university, as I'm sure it is at many institutions. So there's a team that's specialized and works on course review. We have a large volume of all of those things. So there's a specialized team that works on courses and also a specialized team that works on graduate level curriculum. And we all kind of work together closely. So I think that will be part of the conversation later. I've been at ASU for about 12 years in the same unit. So we were excited to kind of share some of our findings and what we learned, and some of the great parts that we've been able to incorporate about Kuali and kind of modernizing our curriculum management processes.
That's great. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Thanks. So you've got a lot of moving parts in your office. Can you tell me a little bit about just some demographic information about ASU? I know it's a large institution. How many students do you serve, and kind of what's the nature of your programs?
Sure. Of the fall 2023, we have 145,000 students. That's across our campus offerings, of which there are many location offerings in the Phoenix metro and also in other places as well. And then we also have a large population of online students. So that's how we get to that 145 number. We have a really diverse student population in terms of focusing our institution on inclusion is how we got to that big number of students, and trying to serve as many different types of populations as we can. As a result of that, in addition to having a large student population and many satellite kind of locations, we also have 1,300 degree programs that are available to choose from, and over 13,000 courses. So our course and program catalog is rather large. To talk a little bit about like the multiple campus locations too, because I know that, you know, there's other institutions kind of do it sort of separately. We are one institution. So opposed to having totally independent campus locations, we manage them all internally. All of the curriculum comes through the provost office. And so the team here and all those specialized teams I mentioned get all of the 1,300 programs and 13,000 courses through our office. So we definitely had a need to make things work more smoothly.
I can imagine. So just to check my understanding of what you're sharing, even though you have different geographical campuses, there's a single process for managing curriculum across all of those. Wow. Well, that's a nice segue to the challenges that you were facing that really led you to seek out a curriculum management system in the first place. So take us back in time and tell us what the landscape was like prior to implementing a system.
Lots of emails with PDFs in the program space in particular, and possibly large spreadsheets that were manually updated. Lots of tracking systems, color coding in Excel sheets. Like you had to be creative about how you kind of manage the workload and the job and the sheer number of things that we had to review. So one of our challenges is obviously our size and just the sheer volume of the whole thing. Our old process was very manual. For programs, we were all paper-based, and a lot of our kind of ad hoc kind of things that came up, like new academic organizations or renaming a school, those kind of things were all paper-based PDFs emailed to an email address and then, routed through 6 different people via email. And then somebody needs to keep track of it and make sure who responded to the email and who didn't. We did have a course review tool that was created by our state. And as is common with those kind of tools that are like homegrown state funded tools, it didn't get a lot of updates. It wasn't something that was flexible, that could be tweaked to, some of the nuances that we were kind of finding in our development process, but it did the job. Like, it allowed us to at least have courses run through some sort of digital system. And we had that probably for 10 years. So obviously it was not always the sexiest product in the whole world, but it certainly helped with the volume of like 13,000 courses that you need to go through.
Right, met a need.
So obviously, for people on our teams, it was an issue of managing all those emails and the attachments and all of that. And for academic units, they had to dig up the right form and make sure it was updated. Sometimes we had to pass it back because the form wasn't the right form. Maybe they saved it on their desktop and then they never got the update that we posted on our website. So there was a lot of kind of time consuming administration that happens around, just not having a flexible process. All the kinds of additions, changes, deletions were all routed manually then through departmental and school processes. So some of those schools had committees. So they might email it to a committee coordinator who sits on the proposals for a month, maybe even prints them out to have that committee conversation, and then, would email it to us once the committee approves. So lots of like shadow processes happening behind the scenes to get everything moved forward. And so it was very resource intensive and just required a lot, at least, a lot of manual tracking and keeping an eye on things and remembering where things were. We decided we needed to make everyone's lives easier, the units, us, and reduce the duplication and just like get rid of some of those inefficiencies of using that old process.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm trying to picture what it would be like to manually manage that volume of information. I mean, you mentioned shadow systems. I can imagine that you need to keep track of emails that have come in and out, what's been approved, what hasn't been approved, some kind of QA process to make sure that the manual information that you're rekeying is correct and having another set of eyes on that. Roughly how many people were involved in that effort?
Well, like I said, we've got many teams that work on things.
Right.
So, and of course,
right.
Now we have the benefit of the workflow that helps us keep track of that.
Right.
We have on our team, we have about 5 people who are reviewing curriculum proposals. And so everyone had to pass it to the next person in email. So, that's kind of a challenge there. And then, once it got through our little review, it would go to leadership. And after it went to leadership, we'd have the committee review. So somebody would have to be putting it on a website. They'd have to actually physically upload the PDF onto a website so that it could be reviewed in a committee environment. And many times in that committee environment, they're printing out those proposals. We know that. And then we're headed back to email to move it through to the implementation stages. So it definitely had to touch a lot of email addresses to get done.
Right, a lot of touch points. Wow, that is remarkable. I feel like I just got a little bit tired and overwhelmed just hearing about that process. So clearly you needed a solution to those challenges. What was on your list of requirements when you were evaluating systems? What were the must-haves?
We really needed something that could deal with our size and scale,
Yeah.
and our propensity to be innovative. So flexibility was really key. Um,
Mm.
we are probably more likely than maybe some institutions, I don't know, to set up a whole new degree type or to change the, requirements for what a proposal looks like, to come up with a new idea for a new type of curriculum, then maybe that needs to have a totally separate workflow. So we needed to be able to pivot. So that was probably our number one thing we were looking for. Somebody who could handle the data volume in addition to our likelihood to want to change or to want to customize things so it fits with us rather than having to adjust our processes to fit into an existing vendor tool. So that was one of the big ones. We wanted to keep it simple for users. It needed to be user-friendly enough that, no one will freak out when we say, hey, we're changing everything about the curriculum process. We wanted it to be easy. We wanted it also to support our system of record, which we're a PeopleSoft school. So that was important. We had a dream that we wanted to allow for integration between PeopleSoft. And so we wanted to be able to streamline our implementation processes. I think that was on our wish list, and we weren't sure that was going to happen. But related to that, I think it was important that we had some data consistency, that we understood that our systems would talk to each other and they play nice, and that our data integrity would kind of be maintained. And I think that those were primarily the things that we were really looking for. Yeah.
Okay. So just to kind of recap those themes, it was being able to handle the scale and volume, being able to be used in an innovative environment where not only new courses and programs, but new types of programs, just new things are being proposed. And so a system that's able to handle those things. User friendliness, so that when you roll this out across campus, people don't say, wait a minute, I can't use this. I don't want to use this. So that's smooth. And then with an eye to integrations, making sure that there's a data structure that made sense and the integration would be possible. Great.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. What options did you evaluate?
Well, if you've heard of a vendor in this space, we probably talked to them at one point in time.
We talked to everyone.
Yes, we went through the whole process. We did try with a previous vendor to set up some forums, and unfortunately, that relationship didn't work out. We weren't happy with the level of flexibility. It just wasn't. It wasn't the right environment for us. We had to do too much manipulation on our side to make it fit, like forcing the square peg into the round hole to make that work. We did, but then we tried again. We recovered from that experience and we tried again. And we did the whole RFP process with the university, and we evaluated many companies. And we also considered making our own. That's something that we've done in the past. When we can't quite find something that fits for us, we, say, well, let's just do it ourselves. But we were really impressed with Kuali because it was really clear to us that it had that level of flexibility that we were going to need. We didn't get the sense that we had to supply our data in only one way, and that's the only way it's going to work. We didn't get the sense that there's only one way to have your form, and that's the only way it's going to work. Like, we have a template and you have to follow it, and that's it. That was not the impression we got from Kuali. We got an impression that we would have resources on how to set things up. We'd have a partner in design of our tool, and also a partner in terms of what integrations we might be able to build out. And I think that that partnership approach and the level of flexibility were the major reasons why we ended up going with Kuali.
Thanks. I'm so glad to hear that. I'm so glad that partnership that felt real and vibrant and that we were able to meet that need for flexibility. That is really great to hear. So having made the decision, what was the onboarding process like? What were the steps and what was that experience like?
Sure. We were really grateful to Kuali to have a lot of support from the team to help us kind of configure everything. We had a project manager from our technology office working with us to help us with the onboarding process. So in addition to the ASU project manager, we had our, customer success folks from Kuali helping us to really create the instance from scratch. We had the Kuali development team who was working on importing and massaging our data and helping us through with the mappings of this field goes here and this field goes there. It was important to us that we load our existing data so that people could layer on changes, that we have our complete course catalog and our complete program catalog in the system so that we could utilize curriculum management and then to kind of scaffold on those drafts. So there was a lot of work that was done in that space. But I was so grateful for Kuali to being such partners and helping us work out all of the nuances of, okay, we really wanted to do this. And we always had somebody we could bounce ideas off of, how can we make it do this for us? And of course, we couldn't get everything we wanted all the time. But I was really happy with the outcome in terms of what we were able to create in terms of onboarding. It was certainly a long process, and part of that was on our side because we certainly had all the forms created, but when you actually put it into that digital environment, you have to kind of rethink how are users interacting with the front end, and also what are you sending forth in integrations? What information do you need to pass through to your student information system or whatever? So it definitely it was a longer experience because there was so much to work out on our side. And we tried to throw curveballs every now and then to Kuali too, to say, well, okay, well, how can it do this? They were great partners in that process in terms of getting everything set up in order to, get it out to the units.
I'm so glad to hear that. And, I think it's not unusual. I mean, because you and your team are experts on your curriculum, but not necessarily on system implementation. And so just having to think through what is the flow of this data from the point of entry through processes, through workflow to integration, where does it need to end up? What format does it need to be in? Just there's a lot of complexity there. Yeah, that combination of data migration and integrations and configuration is worth taking the time to get it right, I think. So you mentioned not wanting to, I think you said freak out your campus community or whatever phrase you used. What was the training like? How did you approach campus rollout and communication and training?
We really relied on the train the trainer kind of approach. And that's kind of how we learned Kuali, certainly from the leadership we got from the Kuali team who was helping us onboard everything. We also created a lot of training materials to support internal processes as well as those academic unit users who are in the field every day creating proposals. We also created a Canvas course training that would walk people through how to use the system, when to use the system, and answer questions kind of on a question by question basis, so that we have a guide on how to do the thing that you want to do, how to create a course, how to modify a course, how to create a new program proposal. So we spent a lot of time dedicating resources to creating really good training materials. As of right now, we have a access request form for Kuali, and we require people to take our Canvas course so that they can prove to us that they have like some knowledge really of how to like navigate and find what they need. But of course, people don't always read your very well thought out training materials. So in the beginning, we had online trainings where we would do a demo to show them how to access certain sections, how to submit a proposal, and that was really helpful. We also could like record those and make those available. And then we also started offering a monthly office hours. I think it started out more frequently and then kind of went to monthly. And those are really initially focused on like Kuali and how you use Kuali and all of that. But pretty quickly that kind of became just a curriculum office hours because the system was easy enough to use that people for the most part found worked out how to use it pretty easily. So I'd recommend if you are thinking of implementing anything like this, having lots of documentation, lots of training materials, and even like having documentation of like those internal processes that you made. For us, a huge amount of that was like integration requirements and specifications, and why did we decide to do it this way and not that way, the kind of like decisions, like those large decisions that you made, just having documentation so people can go back and say, why did we do it this way? And having all those resources really helped us a lot. We actually ended up creating an internal little website just for our own use of Kuali internal resources of all of our documentation that we created as we were onboarding, help guides, job aids, all of those kind of things for really the internal team, the registrar's office, the provost's office, graduate college, all those folks who might need these resources going forward. So that's kind of how our onboarding process was with training and getting things out to the units. It was a big change for everybody. I think some people were a little scared at first, but then once they got into it and knew how to do basic navigation and basic submission of proposals, I think everyone kind of got used to it pretty quickly, which is good.
That's great. Right. And that was sort of going to be my next question. What was the reaction on campus once folks kind of got familiar and got a taste?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten so much positive feedback with people saying, this is so much better than what we used to do. This is so much easier. It has a lot more transparency in the sense that you can go to a proposal and see where it is in the workflow. Who's it sitting with? Well, before it was like a black hole. They would send it to me and I would be moving it on through the 8 different people that need to look at it, but they don't really know that unless we have a tracking document and they can see. So this is really wonderful because they can say, who's this with? Oh, it's stuck at the department level because they have a question, and they can do that kind of like transparent looking to see. So that really is really helpful. And I think I've just gotten really good feedback. I think one of the biggest things people had to kind of adjust their thought processes is really workflow, because it was a black hole before. They didn't know what happened. They didn't have to like formalize their workflows, especially at like the, department college level. They had workflows, but they didn't have to like formally put them into a system. So I think that there was a little bit of like figuring out what was the best way to structure it before it even gets to the provost office, where we kind of like do some hand holding, like what's the best way to work that out and who should have access and who should approve. Those were things that they had to kind of think through, and we helped them as much as we could, but like they had to get through that first couple of like processes to know exactly how that looked in their own environment.
Right. Sounds like you could offer suggestions or guidance, but ultimately those decisions are up to the departments to figure out their workflow. Okay. So it sounds like one of the big benefits was folks just didn't have to wonder or call your office. They could see for themselves, where is this in the workflow? Yeah, that just changes the conversation completely from this takes so long, for example, to, oh, I see where this is. Okay.
And like with any implementation of any tool or software, the challenge that I referred to earlier, people don't read your resources. You still get lots of questions, but I I'm confident that it isn't the tool that creates that. It's just that, people are rushing. They're not really sure. They're feeling unsure about technology or what they're doing in general. And I think once they make those connections, they're very comfortable with it.
Okay, that's great to hear. Well, okay, so zooming out from just this sort of campus reaction, maybe zooming out's not the right transitional phrase, but in any event, for your office, for your team, what has the impact been? Can you talk a little bit about the sort of post-implementation landscape?
Yeah, sure. It is definitely an improvement in terms of not having to do so much manual tracking. You're able to spend a great deal less time updating spreadsheets to represent where something is, because you can easily pull a report and find out where something is. Or you can, if somebody has a question about where a proposal is and what issues might be preventing it from moving forward, it's easy to just pull up that record and send it to them so they can see for themselves. One of the things I really appreciate is the concatenation of data that's just inherent in having a proposal record that moves through the workflow. So one of my job duties is essentially getting these proposals ready for our faculty governance process. And so sometimes there's a lot of attachments. Sometimes there's a lot of statements of support that we need to gather and make sure that those, all get attached to the right proposal. So that was a manual process before. You would have 6 different PDFs and you'd have to smush them all together into one big PDF so that everyone could look at them. And so there's an opportunity for error there. Within Kuali, those attachments are attached to the proposal. That whole proposal can go forth to governance, and they can click on the attachment link to see what the impact statements are. So just the concatenation of data, so they're not individual files, has been very helpful to me personally. And I think other teams have kind of seen that definitely the folding in of proposals on top of other things. You can see historically what happened. So where did the proposal start and what was the most recent change to it? So the versioning of a proposal, being able to see an audit history of the last person made a change. What was that? We used to use track changes on Word, and that's good, but having like that audit capability is wonderful and something I use all the time. I think the workflow component obviously is huge. The fact that I can see at a click where the proposal is and who I need to follow up with, who I need to remind. All of those things have made it so helpful. We have always had a high volume, obviously, of proposals. So it's hard to kind of like put into like firm language or whatever what we have as a result. But we've certainly we don't have less. We probably have more than we did 5 years ago, and it keeps growing. So I think that we can really see how much we needed a like more formal digital process to kind of track all the changes that we have. And certainly there have been hours and hours saved on the provost office team in terms of tracking and monitoring and all of those kind of things.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I was going to ask sort of specifically, it just seems like given the amount of shadow systems and the amount of touch points you were sort of managing manually, your new process must be more efficient.
Yes, definitely more efficient and more user-friendly. It's definitely easier to keep track, and it's definitely easier to provide reports, because it does have, some reporting capability that you can say like, okay, I've got a lot out there. I'm not really sure what. Sometimes units come to me and they say, can you show me everything that we've submitted in the last year? Well, that's something we can do with the reports that would be very time consuming to do, in our previous environment.
Do you feel like there are fewer errors that are the result of manual rekeying? And I realize you probably didn't have a baseline of how often that happened before, but even just in terms of your perception.
Yeah, I think it's certainly my perception that uh, there are things that are just not an issue anymore. One of the
Mm,
big challenges that I used to have is formatting in a Word document or a PDF. Like sometimes people would like create a Word document from a PDF. And when you create a Word document from a PDF, a lot of times the formatting is broken. And I have to
right.
put that back into the template in order to go forth to our governance. So I would have to spend a lot of time like fixing the Word formatting, and I just don't have to do that anymore. And that's huge.
Right.
And my team can do a little bit of pre-work. So for instance, we have those integrations built. My team can do some of the cleanup that they usually do right before we implement in the system, and it'll just push the clean text over to our PeopleSoft instance without having like a gap. And so like there's little things like that that add up to a lot in the overall amount of time that it takes us to process and implement things.
Oh, that's great. Good. I'm glad that's the case. You talked about integrations, and that's kind of the next focus I'd love to turn to because I think it's one of the areas folks have the most questions about. How did you think through your integration? What kind of information are you sending over the interface? Can you talk a little bit about how your integration with PeopleSoft works, what the touch points are, what the data is like?
So for us, we send over program data and course data.
Okay.
We have a homegrown component of PeopleSoft for programs. So that's like largely something that, we've tweaked and tinkered with and created
Yep.
that. So it was kind of like a
Yep.
from scratch kind of like building
Okay.
and mapping process.
Yep.
At the
Unique
course
to
side,
ASU.
yeah,
Yep.
we do
Yep.
use like a good chunk of the delivered PeopleSoft course information, like the course components. So we were able to essentially map 90% of the course data that we would pass back and forth. So we pass back, the course description, the title. We pass back like like a instruction mode. So like whether it's an online course or a in-person course. We have offerings. So is it offered on the downtown campus by this college, or is it offered on the Tempe campus by this college? All of those things are passed over. We also have things like the course components, whether it's a lecture, a lab, those kind of things that are passed over into PeopleSoft. So all of those things that we need in order to actually implement in PeopleSoft, we're able to pass most of those things over. And I know it's a common question about course prerequisites. We made the decision to not pass our course prerequisites over because they are very, very complicated. And what we've done instead is we've set up a reverse integration that the free text that's created can kind of live in Kuali, so people can kind of see like this is the text that would appear, but we don't have the coding behind the scenes pushed or integrated. But we have
Okay.
some things as part of our pushback process that do get updated on the record. So the course ID is one of those things. So PeopleSoft creates our course IDs for us. And so when it's created in the system, it pushes it back to Kuali so that now we have the course ID on that record and we can use that as a data point, and it becomes kind of the key for that record in our data.
Okay.
So there are other examples where we decided not to push some component because of its complexity. But for the most part, we've tried to leverage as much as we can so that something can go through the course review process. We push the button. When we push the button, it pushes over into PeopleSoft. And so we use that for both modifications and new courses.
That's great. Okay. Well, thanks for taking us through kind of how that works. I've got some other questions for you, but I do want to pause and just encourage folks attending the webinar. If you've got any questions for Katie, please don't hesitate to drop them in the Q&A. Happy to take your questions. Absent any questions, I will carry on and ask some of mine, but I just want to encourage folks to feel free to do that. Okay, I want to ask you about your favorite features of curriculum management. If you could pick 2 or 3, or that's kind of arbitrary, whatever number, what would you point to as, or maybe it's your top favorite?
That's a good question.
I just stumped you with that question.
Yeah, you did. Well, you know, it isn't like the ease of like being able to set up like conditional questions, having things hide when you don't need them, having things appear when you do. That is a huge thing. I know it doesn't seem very glamorous.
No, but it's important. So you're talking about the conditional visibility in a form. You can say, display this question based on other questions.
Yeah, that's right. So just like the flexibility of being able to target or tailor the questions based on the answer to previous questions is huge to me. It makes our form so much more efficient, so much cleaner. It's a choose your own adventure.
Too.
Yeah. It's a choose your own adventure from the unit. That's what for the unit I always say.
I love that.
Yeah. So I think that's one of my favorite things. And then obviously, I love the transparency component. So being able to expand the workflow, see where it's been and where it's going, and kind of see all the comments that are there all in one place is pretty cool.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So for folks on the call who might be considering a curriculum management system, do you have advice for folks? What are some of the key things that folks should keep in mind, either when they're selecting a vendor and then when they're kind of implementing and rolling out?
Like I said before, documentation is one of my big takeaways that I had from our implementation. Is like trying to have those conversations about those critical decision-making points in the process. Maybe, you know, as you're looking at partners and vendors, in the sense that, you know, what are those really important things that that you want to accomplish with your implementation, and then having that documentation to say, like, why did we do that? Like, why did we decide to process the data this way and not this way? Why did we decide to ask the question that way and not that way? I think that is really helpful, because you spend so much of the time in your implementation navigating those details. And some things you don't know are important until you're in the moment and somebody says, oh yeah, that's not going to work. If we do it that way, we're going to be missing out on this. And you'll face those. So like making sure you get with your teams and have those conversations. If you know that a record or a form is going to go through multiple teams, make sure that they're all at the table, so that you don't get thrown a surprise at the end. When somebody says, oh, it's not going to work if we do it that way. We had a great implementation group that had representation from a lot of our different units. And I think that really helped us kind of get ahead of some things. It was still a long and time consuming process of designing that as a group to make sure it works for everybody. So I would say that, and also just, you know, you don't have to necessarily decide to change your processes to fit into a new system if that doesn't work for you. I mean, we were open to both. We were open to changing how our processes work. We were ready to redesign those. But we also had a good partner who could, you know, help us develop workarounds, think of different ways to do it, make suggestions. So I think that was really good. Yeah, I just think those are a couple of things that I kind of took away from the process.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Sounds like thinking through your training strategy, making sure the right people are in the room so that you have that early on. And
Sure.
then maybe be open to the possibility of changing your processes, but know that in an ideal world, you shouldn't have to kind of shoehorn them into a system if that
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. Okay, well, my final question for you is about another product that you were using at ASU, another Kuali product. So we've been talking about curriculum management, but know that you're also using Kuali Build, which is a no-code forms and workflow process automation tool. Would you be willing to talk just a little bit about how you're using that in the provost's office? And, are there points of intersection with curriculum management?
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
thanks.
So we added Kuali Build in order to get some deeper control over some of the different types of curricular actions and curricular adjacent things that we have. So we wanted a little bit deeper control over people making changes to programs. There are some actions that we have that just didn't quite fit into the curriculum management world. So we have lots of different types of build forms that we use. So we have one form that is a bunch of different curricular actions that you might do on a program. So you might change the name, disestablish, change the location. We just found that we liked the build product to use for those kind of actions. It gave us more flexibility to ask some way different questions without impacting what comes and goes from our integrations. We also have like kind of less common requests. So requests for a new subject or prefix, requests to create a new academic org or like an organizational structure or a unit, department, school. We have requests for faculty directed study abroad. We have requests specific to graduate programs for program changes, which need a separate level of review. So they needed to be held out, accelerated programs, anything wacky that we could probably think of, we could create a form for, like if, we.
Anything wacky. That's
Yeah,
great.
anything wacky that we might think of. We have, like I said, we have our user request form in there, so people can request access to the system, all kinds of different things. And so we also have kind of turned towards making some student-facing forms in that system. It was just it's so quick to just like turn around a form and put it up. Like if we found a need, we could just like turn it on real quick, which is really great. The financial aid team has recently started using Build for like requests for information for financial aid, guest access for parents, those kind of things. So we're, I think more members of the provost team are kind of like seeing how they could use it too. Another one of the kind of like curriculum adjacent things we use it for is program fees. If they want to request a program fee, it has a whole separate workflow and approval process and documentation that's required. So we run that through our build form so we can gather everything we need there. So Build has been really helpful, and it's been really nice to have the flexibility of that workflow for kind of ad hoc things that come up.
Oh, great. I love that. Thanks for sharing. Appreciate it. Well, I know we want to wrap up before the top of the hour with enough time so folks can get to their meetings at the top of the hour. Last call if you've got any questions for Katie. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and just tell you how you can get a little more information. Okay. Thanks again for taking us through your story and your journey with Kuali curriculum management, a little bit about Build. Really appreciate it. Hope folks came away with some tips and things for them to think about if you're interested in implementing a system. If you'd like more information about Kuali curriculum management specifically, you can visit this URL or you can just use this QR code to get a little bit more information. We are happy to chat with you at any point here at Kuali, so don't hesitate to reach out. And with that, I just love to say thanks so much, Katie. I really appreciate it. I've so enjoyed talking with you.
No problem.
All right. Thanks, everyone, and take care. Bye.
Bye.